Princess time, that's all. Just FYI. What time is it? Okay, it is officially 3:20, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Remote Attestations and Procedures Working Group. If this is not the group you're expecting, you're likely in the wrong room. We're just going to continue. So welcome. Do we have any new attendees in the room? Nope. Okay, so everybody is knowledgeable about the note well with the IPR issues and the code of conduct, as I say. So moving on, let's do the administrative tasks. So I would like to thank, did Peter leave? Peter's still here? Yes. So I want to thank Peter for taking notes. I did set up an Etherpad, so I would encourage everyone to help with the taking of notes, as we are going to have good discussions that I'd like to have captured. So besides Peter, who's going to be taking notes offline, can I at least have one other volunteer? And would love it if they were using the Etherpad. And I also need a Jabber scribe. Gracias. Okay, so I cannot move forward unless I have one more note taker, please. Thank you, Michael. Will you use the Etherpad? No, I wrote that just so that you knew you were on the right. Okay, so thank you for volunteering. With that, I see one, oh, my co-chairs are actually remote. So thank you, Kathleen and Ned, for joining me. I'll be remote. With respect to the agenda, I have a little bit of time here just to go over. So we have a packed two sessions this week. I'm not going to show the session for Friday, but for today, we are going to focus mainly on EAT with a little bit of the conversation on Gary's proposal on QUES, which I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but he will describe that to us. So are there any objections for the agenda or additions? If not, let's get started. So the blue sheet has been floating around and there's only one. So if you need it, just make sure you get to it. Okay.
All right, ready?
You have the clicker? This is the clicker. And just do a flip, make sure it works. Yep, got it.
All right, so the first part of this, the first 30 minutes, there's a clock right here. There's a clock.
I'm going to set the clock, no worries.
So the first 30 minutes of this is basically when is EAT done. So this is four kind of largest claims that are areas of claims we could add to EAT. So this is about kind of future work. The after that, there's 50 minutes or 40 minutes about open issues with the existing claims. So the first part's proposals for new claims. Second part is working on issues for some of the existing claims in the document. All right, so so when is EAT done? Well, when do we have enough claims? I think the answer is kind of never, in that there will always be an IANA registry for adding claims. And so the question is really, when do we take the current EAT document and call it done? You know, what are the set of claims we're going to put in the current EAT document? Because there will always be the opportunity to add documents later on. Other working groups can add claims. People can create file claims with IANA and so on. So, so this is not like some you're in or you're out. This is just when, how do we scope our work for the next, 6 months or a year or 5 years? What do we want to do there? So I'm going to describe the way I want to run this is I'm going to describe 4 areas or 4 claims, and I'm just going to talk through all 4 of them. And then after that, I'd like try and leave about 10-15 minutes for discussion about which ones we think are good and which ones are the higher priority, which ones are the lower priority. I'm only describing them in a conceptual level to try and understand if this is something we want to pursue. There's little bits of work done on them here and there, but there's not like a pull request or proposal for these. All right. So here's one proposed is that we be able to carry the attestation result. So there's the attestation evidence that comes from the attester. It goes to the verifier, and then the verifier outputs an attestation result. What's the format of that? Can that be EAT? And maybe the output is EAT, even when the input is Yang and comes from a TPM. The interaction is Yang and comes from a TPM. Maybe the input is EAT, and all that the verifier does is verify the signature and says, yeah, I checked the signature. Lots of different ways of going about this here. There may be implicit claims just because something was signed by a particular key and was known to be from a particular piece of hardware, then you might know some other things about that, or that the verifier might have insider knowledge or special knowledge about that so they can add extra claims into the attestation result, basically making implicit claims explicit. I think another thing that's really interesting for to be done here is the verifier knows the known good values of the measurements, so that the verifier can look at the input and then translate the measurement values into a yes, everything verified, it's good. I think another interesting one is maybe the device has received some certifications, I don't know, common criteria based or global platform or FIDO. So the verifier might be able to add information that says how this particular thing was certified. If the verifier, I mean, we can imagine a lot of different verifiers. One might be just per manufacturer. There might be also aggregate verifiers that work across lots of different devices. If it's an aggregator, then you could the certification result becomes more interesting. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot that can happen here. I don't see Hank in the room. I would imagine he would have a lot to contribute about this, but.
Oh, he was here.
Yeah. All right. Next claim.
Can I ask a question?
Clarifying question.
Yes. Last page. What do you mean the certifications?
So a formal certification like a FIPS certification or a common criteria certification.
Okay. This kind of information, who sent to who?
What? I'm sorry?
I mean, it's the server sent to device or the device sent to the attestation server?
The verifier would know the identity of the attester,
Okay.
and would have a database of its own that lists what certifications that has.
Okay. Based on some information collected from a device and
Yeah.
to
The identity
check
of the
whether
device.
it passed some certification.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we can put a public key in as a claim. FIDO does this. Android Keystore does this. You could call this a key attestation. I think there's some fuzziness of whether it's a device attestation with a key or it's a key attestation has some supporting information about the device. IoT onboarding often needs a key pair that's used with DTLS, so it's an IoT use case. We put the public key in as a claim. You might put in some conditions about how the key was generated. For example, you could say this key was generated inside a TEE. You might have conditions governing use of the key, like, for example, in the Android key store, there's a bunch of characteristics that say when the key is usable and when the key is not, whether authentication is required, what kind of authentication. So there's you put a lot of conditions in governing the use of the key. So what does it look like? So we would need some sort of something to hold the public key. There's probably a Jose and Jose types already for that. You might want proof of possession, or you might not want proof of possession. If you follow that link there, you'll go see the 36 characteristics Android has for a key that was generated. Some of them are sort of the same as claims we already have. Some of them are different. Some of them are proprietary. Another one that I don't have on the slide here is a PKCS10. So this is kind of it's kind of a fuzzy area. Are we doing PKCS10 or implicitly by just putting a key in an attestation, or do we actually include a PKCS10? Yeah. So this one seems somewhat complicated, but it seems useful because we already have a lot of use cases that are doing this kind of thing. Okay, software inventory claim.
Sorry, I'm late to the party. I have a comment for the last slide. Sorry.
So just clarifying. So the setup here is I'm going through we're going through the four areas first, and then we'll get opinions about whether we want to which ones we want to pursue. It's not a detailed design, because that's presumably we'll jump into a detailed design after we decide which ones we want to do. Yeah, thank you. So the software inventory, I've had a number of people comment about, that there should be software inventory. That's kind of a major basis of trust. This software inventory it's a list of software. It's not the same as a verification of the software like you might get out of TPM. It's just a list of software. So you might have the name, the file path, type of software, version, vendor, maybe some measurements. It's probably an array with one entry per software item, and each software item has a map with all of its characteristics. So ARM's PSA token has done this, so you can go look at the ARM PSA draft. So why would we do this? So the ARM PSA token supports it. Cisco publishes a known good values list of their software. I looked at that. General interest. I think just talking to Hank at lunch about COSWID, the concise software ID. That seems like that might just be the solution we could just reference and slot right in here. That's very extensive, already on the standards track. Seems to do it already in an OS neutral way. So I think that's a possibility. Clarifying question.
Just a comment. This is Stephen Banghart. I'd like to second support for CoSWID or SWID. I think it pretty much has done all the work for you already and can just slot right in here.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So let me, the last one here of the four is measurement or integrity check. So I'm coming at this more from the TEE world rather than the TPM world. And we think about this little measurement really different in the two worlds. So I've listed several, so trying to say, let's be open-minded here about how we look at this. So there's TPM style of, which is a series of hashes taken at boot and reported to the verifier through the attestation evidence. there's runtime integrity check, which is different, which is hashes of running software taken during runtime and reported to the verifier. So you could do this once every day or once every 2 hours or once every month. And because of architectures like TEEs, you can do stuff like that that the TPM can't do. To go further, there are architectures where you do the runtime check and the TE or whatever is knows the expected values. So the result reported is, yeah, there was integrity. You don't have to actually go all the way, have the known good values. The verifier doesn't have to know the known good values because the TE knows it. So these are a couple of different styles of integrity and measurement. They may not be all of them, but there's some examples here that are a little from different places. So why do we do this? I probably don't have to say too much here. TPM is widely used. Samsung has a product called TIMA that's part of Knox that does the runtime part. I think it's also interesting because TPMs can't do the runtime integrity check. So adding the runtime integrity check as another way of doing it I think that's a useful thing. I think this one has a lot of interesting challenges and room for a lot of interesting rewards, because I think it's going to be hard to find a platform or an architecture neutrality because of the way different sort of technology areas work on it. Maybe there's too many different variants here. We can't find a small enough set of measurement schemes. I think the last one is probably the most interesting. How do we find the common ground between the TPM and the non-TPM worlds? I know my conversations don't always ground out or close out when I have had some of those things. So I think that's an interesting one. So, okay, now let's see. That's our 4. So now let's have some discussion about which of the 4 you think are priorities and we should pursue. And should they be pursued as part of the current e-draft, as a separate effort, not at all? So let's...
Yeah, can you
do I have a-
summarize
Summarize the
4?
4, okay, sure. I don't have a summary slide, but so number 1, attestation result. Number 2, public keys, and like PKCS10. Number 3, software inventory. Number 4, measurement and integrity.
So just a procedure. This is Hank. Just a procedure thing. Maybe first do some questions, and then
Sure.
maybe a hum, I guess, for room assessment.
Okay.
So that's just
Yeah.
the very first thing. And now I'll let Hannes go first, and then you again.
Hannes, can you go to the public key claim? Because I believe that already exists
In some form, yes.
in some form, because we specified that with both for CWDs as well as for JWDs. I can send the
Yeah,
link
the
to
public
the
key does, yes.
Yeah.
But proof of possession is different, and all those Android attributes are not in there, I don't think.
so proof of possession is the mechanism to demonstrate that you know the private
Yeah.
key, but and maybe, of course, it's not exactly the, oops, that was a coffee cup. Yeah, so the Android based, I'm not sure, but the keys are in general quite generic. But have a look at that because that has been used in other contexts, so it may be useful to read.
Yeah, I would expect there's a lot of reuse possibility here. Yeah.
So this is Hank again, and I'm very sorry to say this. It takes some pain, but there is actually a defined format for public key for raw public key representation for DTLS, and it is literally defined in. I have to look on my CJIT. Yeah, exactly. It is 7250 section 3. It is a must. Unfortunately, it's a part of the certificate cut out of there without context, and it's awful. It's like the public key info part. But that's how the standard is. And it is not a pure value. So again? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's 2 AS1 items in a block without context. So that is the standard for values for raw public keys for DTLS. So I think format-wise, we are pretty much set there. And Hannes is looking confused or approving? Okay, good. I will not comment on this. Putting an AS1 value into a CBOR structure is...
It's going to happen.
I know, still. I already said it, okay? I already said it. So it's the way. So this is the standard. I think we have to go with that. And I think this is a must. We have to do this.
The whole.
Although it hurts.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, you're saying we must do this here in rats? I thought you were saying the,
Yes.
Yeah, you have to do the scan on rats.
Okay.
So many patients.
Okay.
But the value hurts.
Dave Taylor, I can't keep all 4 of them in my head, but I'm probably yes on all 4 of them, but I can't keep them in my head, so I can't say for sure. But I have a clarifying question about the difference between number 3 and number 4, meaning I think I understand the difference, but I don't know if I understand the difference. Yeah, keep on that one. The 4th one is about what's running. Is this one actually about what's installed, regardless of whether it's running, or is this one about what's running, the software inventory? Is this an inventory of what is installed, regardless if it's running? Is that the intent?
I didn't really pin that down.
yeah, I'm not sure
If
even,
it's what's
even,
running, the reason I ask is if it's what's running, then there's probably too much overlap between the 3rd and the 4th. If it's what's installed, it's nicely disjoint and sounds great.
Yeah.
okay, hold on. So let me just do the clarification. So software inventory could be what's installed. This is a question. Go back to integrity. I'm trying, now that you asked, Dave, I'm like, to me, integrity is what's installed. It's not necessarily what's running either.
Okay, I guess it depends on what you're taking hashes over during runtime or hashes over during boot time. Fair point, yes. My
If it's
interpretation of
runtime,
both
you,
could be
you
wrong.
have to do it dynamically.
So
Okay, so
So
let
like I
me,
said, I'm trying to figure out whether 3 and 4 are actually disjoint things or whether there's overlap between them. If they're disjoint, I'm going to say yes on both of them. If they're not disjoint, I may not say yes on both of them. That's
well,
fine.
what I'm hearing is we need clarification. So Ned was in the queue, so I'm going to let,
My question is more around, do we have the use case context in order to understand how the CoSWID, for example, would be used as something that an attester would assert versus something that a vendor would assert? And how does the verifier know that if the attester is asserting it, how does the verifier determine that that's something that's legitimate or expected for an asserter to be, for an attester to be able to be authoritative?
I'm not sure I have an answer for that.
yeah, I'm trying to understand that if your question is clarification of 3 and 4. Go ahead.
It's used as clarification. Typically, a CoSWID structure is something that describes, reference values, and so that's something that a vendor, a manufacturer would be able to assert. If we're talking about it in the context of evidence that an attester would create, the question is, what's the use case context for why or how an attester would be able to make that assertion?
Okay, we'll move on.
Jump into Kathleen, because I was just going to relay what she's going to say.
Oh, is that Kathleen? Okay,
She
so,
was the first one.
Hi, Miss
Kathleen.
Kathleen.
hi, Kathleen.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So this originated with me with a review of the CoSWID document and was discussed this morning in SACM. And essentially, CoSWID is currently defined to just apply a COSI signature. And in reading the document, it seems like having a software vendor be able to instead do a CWT, seemed to make more sense, and you might get more adoption and uptake where you'd have the signature and claims and something that developers may become very used to, just seeing that a COD is used as opposed to having to look at the structure of the signature and apply it more directly from code, which I think will be more of a one-off than using an EAT or a COD. So you would get additional claims in addition to the signature, and it would be from the vendor. So, you know, it would be that original signature to answer Ned's question. And, you know, then you'd be able to do other things that an EAT could do.
Okay, that's a point well noted. So I'm going to do a time check.
Yeah.
We're 22 minutes in. Do you want answers to this? Do you want to take them to the list?
I think maybe hum on the four different things.
Okay, maybe we should do them one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay,
You don't
Yeah,
want
we'll hum
my,
at different pitches now.
I have some additional.
yeah, that way
to-
we can get them noted on the notes.
Okay. All right. So I guess any last comments before we hum?
Well, in the interest of time, just
cut
make it
off
quick.
me? Yeah, of course I can be quick.
No, come on, quick.
Okay. So, CoSWID per design can express runtime integrity because it has the process and resource collection. Intel can do this already with their SGX. Every process can be hashed and be represented exactly in SWID today. So, but this is not a general solution. Not every platform can fill these items, but there are some platforms that can use CoSWID for runtime integrity. Also, yes, net question is kind of valid. When does a tester creates a SWID to create evidence about its software composition? There might be cases for very, very secure software inventory. I think the RIF use case is a little bit in that domain, but we have to find that out. So I just wanted to highlight this is true. Also, to Kathleen's comment, I made a small question in Suite today because Suite also has a data structure that is very similar to CoSWID. It's actually identical structure to CoSWID, and they also do not use CWT. And I was asking Brendan, the primary author of the manifest, if it is viable to use it as CWT, and his answer was no, there will not be an adoption thing. And again, there might be different voices. Hannes was like more on the neutral part and would like to discuss this. So this is a very important point to discuss and not to hum here today, the CWT thing. That's my last comment. I'm quick.
Yeah,
No.
so I think, Gary, I had cut off the line. Sorry. So the things that we need to hum about is whether the group believes we should be working on these 4 different items, okay?
And
So-
in the short term, I guess is the
Well, and then we decide whether it's either a different document, but
okay.
yes. Okay, so let's just ask the 4 questions in general, and then we can take into the list of how we go about them.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question is with respect to providing attestation result. So will you do the back, Roman, and I'll do the front, or you want to do side by side? Does the group believe we should be working in defining claims for attestation results? Okay? Yes, you are in support. No, you don't. Well, hum if you support having rats work on this. I thought I just implicit. Okay. Okay, now hum. Okay, from this side it's pretty.
Let's hum the other way now if you do not want to.
Yeah.
If you do not hum, if you do not want to work on it, please hum. Okay, so,
Well, maybe we're working on that.
so unanimous. That's a separate question.
I know, you could hum about it.
No, we are out of time. We are 6 minutes out of time. Okay, so for the next one,
Should we work on a public key claim, including things like proof of possession and even cert requests like PKCS 10?
okay, so
As
No,
claim-
we
as
didn't-
claims- As claims in each.
as a claim,
It is a claim.
I haven't seen it. I
So-
haven't seen it.
so what I had
not
heard was
registered.
there are some instances, but there are some gaps in implementation. So,
There, if you go to the IANA registry and look for a claim in CWT that is a public key or a PKCS 10 or proof of possession, you will not find it.
Because it's an OSPA, it's not.
okay, so can we just if the working group believes that this is something that should be defined, whether it's been defined?
Clearly said, proof of possession and
So public key related, shall we put public key related things?
Proof of possession of a public key, is that what you mean?
No.
The proof of possession is, you do proof.
Yeah.
It's like mine.
Wait. I have a comment on this, so I don't, so.
Gary's been waiting patiently, but
Yeah,
make it quick. We're
So
cutting
I
into
view
your,
this as actually not being just, proof of possession or even attesting necessary to the public key. FIDO has a concept, something called credential ID. And I think attesting to a credential ID, which is a handle, a unique handle, ideally, it should be for a key pair, it would actually be included in this. So I think anything related to attestation related to a key pair would be included in this work. I don't think, at least like in the example of FIDO credential ID, any such thing exists with a CWT format today. So I don't believe it exists.
But you're clarifying, like the key is stored in an HSM.
so are you generalizing it or just public-private key pairs?
I think we
So
should,
hold on.
I think we should refine this proposal and hum on it another time.
So we in OAuth with the JWT and also the CWT subsequently, which came out of the ACE working group, there were use cases that required you to do a proof of possession case.
Okay,
Where
so-
the token is bound to a key. That's why we define claims that reference a public key or different variants, key IDs, blah, 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 hashes of public keys, etc. The actual proof of possession requires the person holding that token to demonstrate that it actually knows the private key. That is not in the token itself, quite naturally. It comes in a protocol, and we have also defined different ways to do that. There's a good body of work on that. I would suggest that you look at that before you prematurely standardize something else, because there are implementations and deployments of this already.
Okay,
So you
so I'm going to
benefit
call
from it.
time on this one and suggest to Lawrence that you take it up on the mail to clarify what it is that you want us
Yep.
to ask the question on. So Ned is on the line. Sorry, Ned, I'm going to cut you because we are 10 minutes over now and we still have to get to the other two.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one was software.
Software inventory, probably CoSWID.
Well, do you want it to be explicitly CoSWID for,
I don't
or
know.
in the,
Why don't we say software inventory claim and then work the refinement later?
Yes.
oh, you need to speak
Okay,
closer to the
all right.
microphone.
Okay, so let's hum on this one.
Okay, so how do you want us to restate the question?
Uh,
Does the working group want to work on defining
So, yeah,
claims of software inventory?
does the work
Okay,
group want to work on?
so
software-
hum if you want the working group. Did you get that, Mr. Note Taker?
I think so. Yes, Hum, are you ready?
Okay,
Oh, and Hum and I don't care.
okay. Does the group want, hum if you want to work on what we just said? I'm just trying to be fast. Okay, please hum. Okay, hum if you do not. Okay, so that's pretty clear. Okay, so note taker, 3 humps on the jabber in positive. We're not going to, don't care.
Okay,
Okay, real quick, don't care. Hum if you don't care. Yeah, it's not significant. I'm listening. Okay, let's just keep moving.
all right. So,
Okay,
Guys, if I could really ask the room, we're trying to get through a process. There's a lot of cross chatter. If you want to talk, please come to the mic. When the chair wants to do a consensus hum, please don't heckle from the chairs. If you want to say something, come to the microphone, wait to be kind of recognized. I mean, we're really trying to get through this here. We have a process, please.
thank you. Okay, so for this last one, does the working group want to work on defining measurement integrity claims? Please hum if you want to. Oh, okay. Please hum if you do not. Please hum if you don't care. Okay, so you have some note. If you believe it's important, take it up to the mail and maybe you
Okay.
can get clarifications. 3 hums in favor. That's still not a majority. Yeah, well, no, I'm just saying it's not enough for us to move forward. So I'm directing Lawrence, who is proposing that he take it up to the mail list. Jaime? 4 in favor. Okay,
I think we need to take that one to the mailing list.
so,
okay,
okay.
all right.
So you are now,
So that concludes the first part. Now on to pull requests and open issues. So I've got 3 or 4 that I think are relatively easy, that I just want to get a cross check in with everybody and kind of make you aware of. Then I've got some more interesting ones. And I don't think we may not get through all of them, and there are definitely other claims in the works that are not being shown here today. Okay, so the first one is OEM ID. This is to identify the OEM of typically the hardware. It could be a chip, it could be the device, it could be a module or a submodule or any kind of thing that's manufactured, and it's typically hardware. So the previous PR was a previous description of the claim was pretty light. So now I've added all the correct references and all that. So this claim is based on the IEEE assigned company names that are used either for MAC addresses or just company IDs, and they're all from the same space. They don't conflict. That's just the way IEEE runs it. So the proposal is basically IEEE IDs. These used to be known as OUIs. Now they're called MA-L, MA-M, and MA-S. Yeah, because they have different sizes and all that. So the PR also has, because you typically do these things in textual form, like are shown down there, so the JSON is in textual form in hexadecimal. In CBOR, they're included as a byte string for compactness.
so was this an issue that was filed in the GitHub?
I filed. I basically. I don't know if it was an issue or not. The text that was there before was incomplete because it lacked references and
Okay.
wasn't polished and had some to-dos. Now there's a PR that does have these things in it. I don't think there were any comments on this one.
Okay,
So-
it's just, from a process perspective, we're trying to track all of the issues. So if the group approves it, then one of the chairs has to close it. But
Yeah,
if there isn't
understood.
one,
I mean, most of the issues were filed by me, just trying to keep track of
And that's fair,
what was
but-
going on. But
Very, very quick question for Hank about encoding. I get CBOR for compactness, fine. I do not get some colons or dashes in hex values in JSON. Either make it base 64 or base 64 URL, and then you're fine. decision for this is painful, again, I'm not making that decision.
I'm going to take that to the, I'm going to, I always thought the point of JSON is you can look at it. And if you base 64 something, you can't, it's no longer you can't look at it anymore. It's really common, you can tell what it is. It's really common if you go into your user UI on a device to see MAC addresses in this hexadecimal form. Yeah, we can take that to the list.
Since there wasn't an issue filed, but
Okay. But generally, I guess everybody's okay with the IEEE assigned IDs? No comments about that?
you,
Okay. Okay. Okay, nonce. The previous draft didn't really do the nonce claim very well. It was making reference to JTI and CTI. My understanding is that JTI and CTI are token identifiers, not nonces. I mean, they look a little bit like nonces, and the text says that they are to prevent replay protection. But my understanding is that they can be generated locally. Well, what this PR does is says that the relying party, the ultimate consumer of the token, should generate a nonce, and then that should go into a claim called nonce. That claim already exists in JWT. The nonce claim does not exist for CWT, so the document proposes adding it to the IANA registry. Comments? Questions?
any objections to that?
Okay.
No.
Okay, so this one is more hardware oriented. The previous PR had 4 independent booleans for whether, well, actually, yeah, it's ignore the first one, secure boot enabled, because that hasn't been changed. But the next 4, debug disabled since boot, permanent disable, and full permanent disable. It had 4 independent booleans for that, so you could come up with 16 different states. Now it's just an enumerated type, and you choose whether it's not disabled, and if you claim full permanent disable, that means all of the things previously that it is disabled right now. This is really more focused on hardware debug facilities, not like running GDB in your in a process under your own username. So like ARM core site or JTAG or things like that. That's what this is really aimed at. And typically, a lot of times, the enabling disabling is going to be by fuses. This one I'm actually interested in like review comments from hardware manufacturers like Intel, ARM, and Qualcomm of whether this can work for them. And the point here is to try and come up with something that is relatively independent of the hardware. So like a relying party can know what it is, rather than every hardware vendor describing boot state by some register that's proprietary to them.
Hi, this is Hank. I really tried not to come up here. But this is not hardware independent. This is platform specific. Some platforms will never ever be able to map to that, and some will. So I think it is hardware specific, and that I think there should be a indication what platform this is for.
I mean, the intent was to try to make it not platform specific, and I would be interested in how we could make it more general.
Okay. First of all, I would disencourage the deprecated use, the use of the deprecated term secure boot. Then I would make it the scope of the secure boot. Sometimes, as you personally told me, sometimes you don't even have a UEFI or AFI.
Well,
I'm
he's
just talking about-
changing it to the bottom.
We're just
I'm
talking,
so sorry.
let's just do debug state
It's
today.
the
Bottom half.
bottom.
The top part is obsolete, bottom half is
Yeah, so let's, I mean, is this okay or not?
What does debug mean?
Means whether some debug facility is turned on or not.
Okay, some has to be defined platform specific, I guess.
You're saying it still needs to be platform specific.
Yeah, the
Then you-
debug can mean so many things that I would not know how to use this if I would be an implementer. I know 3 platforms personally, and 2 of them with debug, and I have no idea how to use this. This is not being negative criticism. I just don't
Have you
know.
read the text?
I did. Not the details of the new one, I have to admit.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Please read that and
Lawrence, are
comment.
you saying there's enough context in?
There's more context in the,
Okay.
yeah.
So Dave, Ned was on, so,
correct. Ned's first.
Yeah,
Ned,
question, 2 questions. One is the secure boot enabled still defined even though it was moved out of the structure? And the second observation is that hardware vendors do things differently. Every model potentially is different, and it's necessary that those each model and vendor have some way of specifying in detail what those differences are. So we do need some way to support vendor-specific claims. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be some non-vendor specific claims that everybody agrees to, but it's going to depend on use case as to how useful they are.
Yes, so vendors can always have proprietary claims. There's no prohibition against that.
Dave Taylor, I like the bottom half, although I like it better if you change one word. If you change the word boot to the word start, it is applicable to more of my scenarios. In the bottom part, the disabled since boot to, if that is disabled since start to, it's applicable to more scenarios. And a particular scenario I'm thinking of is SGX enclaves. We're on the same processor. You can have some enclaves that are debug and some that are not, and neither of them happen at boot. They both happen at enclave start. And so if you have that change from boot to start, that means I can use this. Thank you.
and
Cool.
so would this apply to the different platforms in your view?
The ones that I use, yes.
Okay.
I use Prestone and SGX.
Okay,
And I would use it if you change that.
Gary?
Gary.
Yeah, Gary Munium, Qualcomm. So since you specifically requested Qualcomm feedback on this, one thing that's bothered me since we first submitted this a year ago was we never had a good reflection of RMA modes in this enumeration. So RMA being a term of art, return material authorization. So to be specifically Qualcomm, when an RMA debug that is enabled by Qualcomm, that is different from when an RMA debug is enabled by an OEM. And both of them have their own specific considerations. We may not, so as far as what, data that the OEM may have provision that we would not want to see, and vice versa. So I'm wondering how best to handle that. I don't think the states are inaccurate. I think the states are fine, but I don't think we have that. We're missing that granularity between the SoC manufacturer and the OEM. I'm wondering how we can take care of it in this. I mean, can we just put a label in there into that claim matrix saying that these debug states are what the OEM has enabled, these debug states are what the SoC manufacturer has
Okay.
enabled.
Are you asking for an addition, Gary, in there?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I
So-
understand the addition, yeah.
so you're okay with this with potential additions? Okay.
Said OEM and manufacturer, not the same words.
Well, okay,
Two other words.
Can we not do that now? Just,
Yeah,
Take it
chip
to the list.
vendor versus device maker.
So, having worked on debug systems at one point in my life at TI, the actual scan chain debug systems.
Oh, scan chain, yeah.
Yeah. So, it isn't in a bunch of the TI parts, you would never know. Like, you could never actually state that. And I'm wondering if an unknown is actually something you want to say, because
that's good.
at the level of which I used to work on those systems, I could actually toggle the bit that told anything above the actual silicon from knowing.
Yeah, okay. And scan chain's another, yeah, that's an interesting one, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. Three valued Booleans are super valuable for this kind of thing. Doing unknown values
Okay.
is really important, especially when you're doing any kind of large scale analysis on like large amounts of this debug data. Any kind of unknown value is going to greatly enhance your ability to get meaningful information out of it.
Okay.
So I think that would be important.
Thank you. Okay, so this one, I'm going to take the feedback, try a rev, and take it to the list.
You can make some of the additions, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I had another slide here. Oh, well, oops. Okay.
You got him.
All right, let's keep going. All right, so this is the interesting one. I think that generated a lot of discussion, at least I'm hoping to. And it's probably one of the areas that I've struggled with the most in the design here. So I'm taking as an example here a mobile phone that has a bunch of subsystems. So you have the TEE, and the tester is in the TEE, and it has a signing key. Then you have all these subsystems that are truly independent subsystems. They boot independently. They have isolation from each other. So you really can think of them as separate subsystems. The idea here is that these subsystems can make claims, give them to the attester, and the attester can sign them. And the attester has to know that it's coming from the Wi-Fi subsystem, and that is really different from coming from internally from in here, and has to mark them as such. So these things are all connected to each other over a bus, or some sort of internal very short wire or something like that. There's no Bluetooth or wire or IP or anything like that here. These are presumed to be all very tightly connected. In this case, the Android is actually running on the same CPU as the TEE. It's just different mode, right? So you can get information from Android. You might even get information from an Android app as well. And maybe you might say, I should draw this line that goes from the Android app to Android and then to the attester. I'm showing also the cellular modem and the phone part of the system as a subpart that actually has the ability to sign and eat on its own. So it's got a signing key and it has an attester. So what it transfers over the bus here is a full signed token. So this is you might call this the nested eat. So a couple other points. Each submodule here has a string name. It has a bunch of claims. It has an indicator of how strong the attachment is. That's probably something we can have a lot of debate about. Claims are not inherited, so each one would have to report the boot and debug state. Each one probably should report the nonce. I thought about having inheritance, and it's just felt like a big mess, so didn't do that. And then I've already talked about the two types here. So I think I have. So this is what changed about the in the PR from what was there before to what's there now. I think the cleans up a bunch of stuff. Submods and nested eat were separate things before. Now they're the same thing, and just two different types of entries. There wasn't really a good way to have more than one nested eat before without violating some C-board design principles of duplicate keys. And then there was a separate claim for the submod name. Instead, I'm using the label or key in the map for that. And then there's the new claim for a submod attachment. Okay, and here's an example. So I'll start while you're reading that, we can start comments and questions.
Okay, can you go back to the one that had all the fancy diagram? Sorry. So before this, I prepared my list of things that I would want, and you've done a good job here because almost everything that I want is actually I'm looking at each submodule has bullets there, right? Where you say string name, claims, indicator of attachment strength. And so for my list of things that are metadata about claims, you have a claim that's about, X, and then you want some metadata about it. There are 4 things that I had. Who added the claim, which I might map to the string name of the submodule.
Yeah.
What level of confidence did the claim adder have in the value, which I might map to the indicator of attachment strength. When was the value taken, especially if it was different from the time that the claim was generated.
Yeah.
And you could argue that one goes inside the claims and like an age or something like that.
It's already,
And so that's
it's already there.
So one of the things I'm going to get to here is, are all 3 of those bullets, could those all be claims, or are some of those things that are not, there's the string name a claim, is the indicator of attachment strength, is that a claim? And you just have a bunch of claims with some of them are metadata about all the other claims in the same set, okay? And my last one is, what is the source of the value, not the source of the claim, in case you got the value from some external entity? So let's say you're reporting geoloc, right? Your claim adder might be your GPS device, but the source of the value might be satellite X or some external entity that you got it from, that kind of thing. And so those are the 4 things. The only one that I don't see on there, unless you create a claim for it, is what's the source of the value. Okay, so my meta question is, can all these be expressed as claims? If you do, then it's more like saying it's the nested concept for all those, including the top 3, not just the bottom one. The bottom one isn't special. All 4 of them use the same nesting concept as a way of indicating the submodule name and basically the metadata. So great job at accomplishing my requirements. I think there's only one thing I would want to add, and one question: could you just interpret them all as claims and use the submodule as the way to group claims? And so some of those are claims that are metadata about the other claims. So
I think that's what the way it should be. If you look at this here, okay, yeah, all right. So sorry about the size. So I have 3 submods here, and this submod's name is AppFoo, which is an Android app. The attachment is a claim there, right? So we could add age as a claim, and so the only thing that's really not a sort of a subclaim is the name of the submodule. And actually, the previous design, I had the name of the submodule as a claim, so I could go back to that. I don't have a strong feeling. Okay. Okay.
So this is Hank. Please don't throw things at me. I think most of this is actually covered by the attestation provenance concept in the architecture. And it's not only about age. Sometimes it is about the entity that is the origin provenance, and maybe there's a chain of it. But I'm out of agreement with Dave otherwise. And could you go back to somewhere there? The submods was signed. Signed submods are a little bit more complicated because they are semantically opaque to the root EAT, because if you want to include a signed EAT, it will be done with .cbor data type in your information model, and then it is opaque, and you have to do another information model just for that sub claim set. That's the only thing here, because signing opaques things. You cannot semantically check them there with the information model. You have your own information model typically, but that's just a nit here, because otherwise the information model syntax you're using is broken, I guess. But otherwise, this looks actually, and one good comment, it really shows what is attesting and what is attested. So Wi-Fi submodel is attested, and the TE is attesting it. And I think this shows the demarcation line. And then you have a sub-attester. That is another attesting environment that is nested in a attesting environment. I think this is a very good. Maybe we should somehow abstract that picture and put it into the architecture.
Okay.
You're on, Ned.
Yeah, so just to continue in that line of thinking, it's still not clear to me the difference between what is the attesting environment and what is the attested environment, and whether or not And a tested environment could be something that signs something, but is attested by an attesting environment. Looking for some use case context on to help justify the complexity and to map it to something real.
I'm sure I'm following that.
You're saying to augment into the diagram, who's doing the attesting?
Typically, the expectation is that the attesting environment has some special ability to observe the attested environment such that it can make these claims legitimately. Okay, it can say, I have access to the memory region, I can look at the memory region and verify that indeed it is a submodule X or submodule Y, or I have access to a bus and the bus is secure, and therefore I can with authority say that I've observed, the Wi-Fi submodule, for example. What's not clear is the case where there's another module which is also signing and what it is that it's observing versus who's observing it. I don't quite get the use case for the linkage for things that sign other things and so forth.
This is Dave. I don't think this picture here actually shows the attesting versus attested environment.
Yeah.
I agree with Hank that you should actually discuss that, especially in the architecture document, but I don't get that out of this picture. What
Yeah,
this
we're
picture
trying-
is saying the cell phone modem in the bottom right is itself attesting some claims. The TEE main attester is taking those for granted because it was signed by that other, by attester number 2,
Yes.
and it may be including yet encapsulated or inside of a claim or whatever. Here's this other claim set I'm putting in mine, but I'm not attesting the code. I'm just relaying this or something.
Yes.
That's what it's actually illustrating here in his diagram. That's
the
different from what
intent.
Hank wants and Ned is pointing out that that's different from what Hank wants. Okay. And I'm just translating here.
Thank
Okay.
you for that
Yeah.
clarification.
Okay. Okay. So at least we want clarifications in the text for what really is happening here.
But I
Yeah.
think that's separate from what you were trying to raise here.
Yeah, I'm trying to come to
Yeah.
good text for all of this. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep moving.
So I want to make another comment here about this. This is, I've used a mobile phone here, but this could be a car. And this could be braking and this could be entertainment and this is, some head end and maybe this is the, I don't know, the nav system, which itself has many subcomponents. So you can nest and all kinds of stuff.
I will now speak on behalf of Ira McDonald. I have the authority. A car is not like this.
Okay, can we just move beyond that? He said like, okay.
My car is.
No.
All right. Okay, so that was really good. Any more comments or discussion on this? So I will probably try and update the text a little bit based on the input here, and then another PR, and then raise further confirmation on the list. Okay.
So time check, you have 12 minutes left?
12 minutes. Okay. So now I
There
have
will
to
probably
leave.
be other attachment types that we may add in the future because I have some ideas, but we can
Yeah,
talk that offline.
yeah. I mean, I think we have to go through a lot of revs of the draft to really get this locked down. So this is actually really great progress from my point of view. Okay. Gary, I think you can actually just take the rest of the time here. Why don't you just take?
Like I said, well, it's
I mean, yeah, no, I think Gary, you take the security considerations and then you take the quiz stuff. That should close out the 12 minutes. I think that's reasonable. And the stuff I have is, I got a lot of value out of it, so I'm content.
Thank you. Okay.
You got to wave your hands because it's going to take me a minute to
Sure.
download your data.
Yeah. So I'll just mention some things. So I took a first stab at security considerations. I have no illusions on this. I know that when this document gets to later stages and it goes through IESG review, it will undergo a lot of revisions. But I felt there were some things that resulted from the last face-to-face that made a security considerations section more important. One of the things I also started with a disclaimer. I will need to eventually harmonize the terminology used in this section with what's actually brought forward in the RATS architecture, and we'll be discussing the RATS architecture more on Friday. So I'll mention one thing that came up in the last face-to-face was manufacturer provision key material. We decided very specifically we would move that out of the main text and move that into security considerations. So I put in some descriptions on best practices for creation and transport of manufacturer key material. Now I'll mention this primarily comes from my experience in the semiconductor industry, and this may not be the experience of many participants in the IETF, particularly creation of key material in what I'm defining as an enclave, leveraging from the RFC 4949 definition. Transport, and when I say secure transport here, that doesn't necessarily mean transport transport over some sort of network communications. It could also be through human courier, and there are a lot of other interesting practices on there. And when I talk about encrypted storage, I didn't go into descriptions on this, but this could be encrypted flash drives that a human courier takes from one secure enclave to another secure enclave, brings it into, as I said, in semiconductor, into the SoC, presumably maybe encrypted RTL, takes that flash drive, physically destroys it and disposes of it in a way that the information on there cannot be reconstructed by a hostile party. So take a look at it. If you have different ideas on this, please let me know. Transport security is another area that I addressed. Basically, we do leverage CWT and JWT quite a bit. So there's in the EAT document we can just point to those relevant sections. However, as Lawrence had discussed with the use of the nonce, I did put in a discussion on anti-replay, particularly whoever creates what I call an actor here in anticipation of the architecture document. One of the assertions I make in there is whichever actor creates the nonce should be the same one that consumes the nonce, that verifies it. And if intermediaries are being used, then that nonce needs to be able to make it through those intermediaries. I think if we're anticipating more complex architectures in the more complex uses of intermediaries in the architecture document, I'd like to see that before I give any more recommendations on anti-replay. Mind going to the next slide?
You have the clicker.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Okay, now we're getting into some things in architecture, and this is an area where I'm not really sure whether it belongs in this document or not. We just discussed submods. So a corresponding concept is what I'm calling multiple EAT consumers. And I don't like the word consumer. I would like to replace that as soon as possible, but I don't know what we will call it as far as the architecture is concerned. One of the things that Lawrence mentioned was attestation results. So I do have some discussion in there about verifiers who are providing attestation results downstream. So Lawrence had mentioned, for instance, that those attestation results can take the form of an EAT. Well, it could be that a verifier itself may have to attest to its own security state for downstream recipients. Also, verifiers for specific submods and how that would be considered. And like I said, does this discussion belong in the architecture doc? Here's a little bit of an interesting diagram. I apologize for it. I created it yesterday, but and it may not be so easy to see, so I'll try to give a description. At the top, an attestable device provides an EAT to a verifier. The verifier, in turn, provides its own EAT to a relying party. Now, the EAT that's provided by the verifier could contain attestation results, depending on how we decide the attestation result related claims are finally formatted. But the EAT itself is clearly recognizable as originating from the verifier. The second result actually shows something different for attestation results, which is probably beyond the scope of the normative text in EAT, which is the attestable device provides the EAT to the verifier. The verifier just conveys the attestation results directly to the relying party, and that is possible, in my opinion, when the verifier and relying party already have some other form of trust establishment between the two. So the relying party clearly knows who the verifier is, clearly trusts the security state. They could be located in the same premise, for instance, in the same data center. They could have already mutually authenticated each other through other means, and in which case the attestation results may be just conveyed independent of an EAT. Like I said, that's outside of the scope of the normative text of EAT, but I think it's appropriate for security considerations. Now, this final diagram down here, which I didn't find a good way to actually depict it graphically, actually shows a EAT with several submods coming from the attestable device. So the initial recipient of that EAT is what I call the verifier of the top level EAT. And if there are submods that are each that encapsulate the EATs, they will each go to their associated submod verifier. See submod A verifier, submod B verifier, and all the verifiers will eventually pass their attestation results onto the relying party. In this case, the example shows EATs being passed, the attestation results being passed in the form of an EAT to the relying party. Now, as I mentioned with anti-replay, each of those verifiers will own the nonce, created the nonce that's associated with the EAT that it's verifying. Yes. What's that?
Hi, this is Hank again. Yeah. Sorry. What this assumes is that the attester, I really would not call it a testable device, that the attester knows which parties out there will be able to appraise the evidence. This is an assumption that is not always true. It might be true in the EAT scenario that comes from specific use cases that Michael is aggregating. But I am relatively certain not every use case is built on the assumption that the attester is aware which verifier will be able to appraise its evidence. So this nesting you are proposing here is based on an assumption that is not always true, I think.
That's a fair point. I think it's I think it's reasonable, but I think I also have a problem with the more general assumption in that nonce needs to have some provenance. Otherwise, the verifier, you won't be able to get the submod EAT routed to the proper verifier.
That is very true. I think this can be remediated by the attester giving a hint that it thinks it knows. And the verifiers will then assess that hint and like, yeah, you're wrong, or can follow this up. Also, nonces, I think, are not only there for anti-replay, but for providing freshness. And if you start to relay them, freshness deteriorates. So there might be a use of another layer of nonces, and I will go now.
Ned, you're on.
Sorry. Is it the case that the verifier of submod A would provide its nonce to the top level verifier who would forward it on to the attester?
Not necessarily, but in this example, it could be seen that way. But but there are other architectures that are possible, and the nonce could be provided to what I'm calling the attestable device in other manners other than through a single point of contact. Yeah.
Go ahead. Dave Taylor. So the bottom case has a whole bunch of complexity. I'm undecided as to whether we need it or not, and I defer to if there's a use case that needs it, great. Thank you for writing it up. I don't know if there's a use case that needs it. That's a question that I have. What I originally was going to get up and say is that those three cases is not the only case. Laurent talked about the other one where the thing on the left is not an EAT and the thing on the right is an EAT. And so in his slides, he talked about how that might be, you know, a Yang TPM thing on the left and an EAT on the right, meaning the attestation result part, and that should be a fourth diagram.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, Frank Xia, I think I agree with Dave. I just want to say this is not a security consideration. It's just another use case. Maybe we need some solution to support it, but I don't know why you talk a security consideration like this. So,
in this case, there are two things that are coming into play. There's transport security, as I mentioned in the middle, in the middle example, where the attestation results are conveyed not in the context of an EAT.
I know there are some security issues here, but firstly, it is attestation use case, I think. So it's not the typical remote attestation security problem. I don't know if I expressed.
Yeah, I think the second thing is what I talked about with the anti-replay. But yeah, that's fair. If you comment on the PR, then if you think that this text should be refined, yes, please, Dave.
So this is Dave again. Clarifying question on the diagram, which is the simple one that has EAT and EAT. Are you assuming that the nonce on the left is the same as the nonce on the right, or the fact that it's regenerating it with some transformation means that the nonces can be different in those two EATs? Which
The
is your
nonces
assessment?
can be different.
Nonces can be different. Okay. So if the nonces can be different, then moving down to the bottom, the nonces can be different in each of those lines as well.
Yes.
And so then if that's the case, if I'm interpreting your answer right, then the attester does not need to know the verifier. He's only talking to the top level verifier because that's the only nonce he needs to include.
Well,
Because you could do a transform at the verifier there to insert its own nonce in there in the same way as it's doing an attestation result. You could construct a solution that way. Whether you think that's a good idea or not is a different question that Hank may comment on. So.
Yeah, so there could be multiple remote attestation servers you know that the attester actually directly is aware of, and then the nonce creation is viable. If not, there has to be a distribution system, and we add a ton of complexity.
I don't like the complexity unless it's necessary
All right. So if we go back to submods, in reality, I don't think that it's typical that you would have, if you have three submods, you would have three different nonces, because I think the same verifier would verify all three of the submods. So I agree that may be this could be a solution in search of a problem, and it's not even a good solution. It's not even a perfect solution from that perspective. Sorry.
That's it? You want to go into the other one?
Yeah, wait, could you? Yeah, just one more thing. Any topics that are missing, please put it on the PR, and I'll be happy to take a look at them. I think just bear in mind, though, particularly for the co-editors of the architecture document,
What did you
do? Bear in mind that if you're going to be addressing those same issues, then we will need to reconcile. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the takeaway, yes.
Okay. All right. So, how much time do we have? 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be able to leave some. So, going on the earlier discussion that Lawrence started with proposed claims to round out EAT, we decided prior to this meeting to submit a informational document on something called the QES token. So what does QES stand for? Qualcomm Wireless Edge Services. And there was and so it actually goes to a company strategy known as CAS, Chipset as a Service. I just say them. I don't make the marketing terms. So, but that when you go to that press release, you'll see that. Yeah. But it was announced. It was announced a little over a year and a half ago. Attestation was a key service, and this is actually something that semiconductor manufacturers that we've been struggling with quite a bit, and that is how do we best deploy an online attestation service such that relying parties can take advantage of it without having to expose a lot of key material, critical key material to third parties, even if they are trusted, and even if you have PKI in play. So that's what Quez came about. Attestation was a key service, and the attestation was COSE based, and we call it Quez token. So some of the key commonalities between Quez token and EAT, there is a OEM ID, there is a concept of nonce in there, but there are several differences today, and these are some things that we can consider as far as whether they belong in EAT or whether they belong in a profile like Quez token. So there's device ID is used a little bit differently, and this is something I discussed with Lawrence, because the Quez token to device ID can be specific to a service provider, and I've looked at the way we're addressing Quez service provider as far as Quez is concerned, and I believe I can say it's identical to the way a service provider is defined in TEEP. So I think though Lawrence may have a proposal as to how to reconcile defining a UEID that's specific to a service provider. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. There's also a hardware version, which is the chip version. Context. So this is somewhat. So this might be related a little bit to what you were talking, Hank, and that is this is a claim defining the context of the attestation. So is it supposed to be used for authentication? Is it supposed to be used for certificate issuance? Is it supposed to be designated for a particular verifier? That's not something that we've anticipated, but that could be another thing that could be put in context. Yeah. No, nobody's on. Yeah. PK hash. This is a hash of the public key provisioned by the OEM, specifically used for authenticated boot. I don't know of an equivalent to EAT on there. That's not Qualcomm terminology either. That's quite a common concept in the semiconductor industry. Yes, Hank.
Yeah, okay. PK hash first. So I assume that the evidence does not come with the public key, but with the hash of the public key, and then you go back to the asserter, that is a supply chain or vendor, and then we resolve the hash with the actual public key, get it, and now are finally able to validate the validity and provenance of the evidence. That's correct?
Yeah. So the use case primarily is assume that I've done something. Assume that let's talk about like in a suit context, software update context. Assume that I sign assume that I'm the manufacturer. I'm signing my software updates with a private key, and there's a public key. There's a public key instantiated on the device, and I verify according to that. Now, suppose that I found out, somehow the private key has gotten lost. Disgruntled employee or something like that. I need to provision a new public key on all these devices before I start pushing software updates onto them. Well, how do I know this device is the tip of the public key of the public keys that I'm using? Well, I can just query the PK hash and get it via a testable result.
Why is the hash not also destroyed? It is an assumption of is it destroyed? Everything is destroyed?
Yes, it would be if the device is at the if the device is updated its public key store. If it's updated its
the asserter retains like a secret key derivation function to reconstruct everything, and then this would be possible.
I mean, it's usually like a standard hash. It's a SHA-256.
Oh, it's a SHA. Okay. It's a big index, like a super, for every device, a mega index, hash index, maintained by the asserter, provided to the remote attestation function, I guess.
Can I
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
you
try
can
it.
try, because I don't get it.
So this key this public key has nothing to do with verifying attestations.
Yeah.
This key
Oh.
is only used to verify the software that you're going to run.
How's it different? It's always evidence.
Well, the key that you're going to do to no, the software that you're going to, so it's authenticated boot. So the software that you're going to boot has to be signed by something. So the person that produces the software that's going to be run has the private key, and then the device has the public key. So the device uses that to verify the software.
It's implicit attestation by origination.
It's not
Okay.
even attestation.
Okay, so then I get the
Yeah,
context.
and,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's a stand-in for an OEM ID because
Yeah,
you
but
know
it's
that
not,
you
not
know
exactly-
that
it'll be unique
the
to the
OEM
OEM.
have to have that private key, otherwise they couldn't have signed the software to run on that device, right?
Yeah.
And when OEMs misbehave and do all sorts of things, sometimes that works, right?
Yeah. There's another difference, the service provider ID. I believe like I said, service provider concept in Quez is the same as in TEEP. We discussed this morning in the TEEP meeting that there will be a TEEP profile for each. So I don't believe this is a candidate for commonalizing with the software inventory. We just went through the hum. We're going to do we're going to be defining software inventory claim. Quez token has two claims specific to that. There's something called the QC version, Qualcomm Secure Execution Environment, but it's really the TEE version. There's also the firmware version as well. So this is firmware used specifically for bootstrapping the device. Okay, I'm running out of time here. We mentioned earlier on the public key claim certificate signing request. We actually have the ability to carry a PKCS10 compliant CSR in the attestation token. You might say, why are you not sending it separately? Well, it potentially saves a round trip, and for IoT devices, that's very important. Yeah. Security state. Now, this is actually something that I hope we consider. Yeah, sorry. Forget him. Let me just put this away. It's confusing me. Sorry. Security state. So Lawrence had talked about, representation of debug. We talked a little bit about the representation of secure boot state. Actually, a lot of that is controlled in a fuse array, a one-time programmable memory. I'm calling it a fuse array, but really the definition is one-time programmable memory. It's non-volatile, and it could come in the form of electronic fuse array. It may not. Security state in the Quez token is actually a survey of the bit setting in that non-volatile memory that actually covered the debug state or the secure boot state in the SoC. Is that something we would consider for EAT? That's something we can take offline. App hash. Well, this is actually suitable for the TE model. It's actually the hash of the client app that's conveying the attestation token. That will be in a TEEP profile, so I don't believe that's really so. We have to dwell on it much further. So some final questions. Should security OTPs be sent directly, or is the information should the information be conveyed via representative claims? I'll put this back on the mailing list. We don't need to hum today. I mentioned what context was. Should we have a context claim? How is the attestation token? What are the restrictions on the usage of the attestation token as conveyed by the attester? We mentioned software inventory. I discussed a little bit on device identifiers. TE considerations, I'm not going to get into this here because we already said we're going to do a TEEP profile, but these are some things that could actually be considered as part of a TEEP profile. So I think I'm done. Right? I think
Yeah, so is your intent, because you submitted a draft, is your intent to bring the draft in as a potential profile?
yes,
Is that-
yes, it will be a potential profile, but I do want to have it. I do want to resolve these questions, whether some of these claims that I mentioned here belong to
Going to
EAT
eat,
or do they
okay.
belong in the profile.
So
And I need to take that to the
when
mailing
you
list.
pose it, just make the clarification, right?
What is the preferred way? Would you like me to file issues, Lawrence, or do you want me to put it on the mailing list?
The issues make it more formal, And that way we can
Okay, I'll do that.
get them.
Okay, I'll be certain to do
Right.
that.
And that'll give you guidance as to what goes in the profile too.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Could you skip one slide back, please? Please, this is Hank. Shoot, you said something about the slide. It's not on the slide. You wanted to add something here, a specific claim that is not highlighted here. What was it?
I think I've highlighted everything here earlier in the deck. I think context we
Yeah,
discussed.
context. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it is,
It's just, yeah, the third
Oh, it
bullet.
was there.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Might that be related to the audience tag in CWT?
Audience tag though, it could be. Yeah, I've thought about that before too. I think though, I think it doesn't, audience tag, you would have, it would have, the usage, the intended usage of the token would be implicit in the audience tag. So basically the audience
Yeah,
tag
they're
would
somehow related.
have to represent that. And I don't think it's, I
Okay.
don't think it's as explicit.
We're out of time, so we should continue this on the list. Ned, it has to be quick because we're over time.
It's okay. Let's take it to the list. I'll put my
Okay.
hand up.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to reconvene Friday at 10 a.m. We have a very full agenda then. So expect very crisp. Okay. Discussions. Thank you. Bye. Blue sheets. Where's the blue sheet? And did everybody sign it? Well, I thank Lawrence. And you can see why we need to have them because. Who has the blue sheet? Can you please bring it? Está ahí en el medio. Muchísimas gracias.